Hello and welcome to Retelling After the Pandemic. What have we learned? This webinar hosted by myself, Nathan Smith. I'm the Senior Vice President of Product Strategy for Appriss Retail. And I'd like to take the next 30 minutes or so to give you an overview of what we've seen as changes in the industry, what our customers have seen as changes in the industry as we head through 2020 and 21 and in some uncharted waters and strange times. And what impacts have we seen because of the pandemic, and what have we learned about that? And wanted to share some of those thoughts and insights with you. As I said, I'm from Appriss Retail. We're a provider of data analytics services to retailers, specializing in solutions which rely heavily on machine learning and artificial intelligence to make informed decisions to help augment and curate the consumer journey and maximize revenue and profitability for retailers. So what are the big changes to retail that have happened during the COVID-19 pandemic? Well, we can all say that there's been lots and lots of changes, and we all know that, and retail is always a changing environment. But I think the one thing that's undeniable that everybody will focus on is that e-commerce and digital commerce trends have accelerated. And there's lots of anecdotes out there in the industry about the industry expanding 10 years in 10 months or other such statements and statistics. But what we have seen is there's been real increase. There's been real increase in sales online, either through necessity or because of people's new choices and personal preference because of the risks or the perceived risks of going into stores during the times of the pandemic. Unfortunately, that has had a somewhat negative effect of something that was happening pre-pandemic, but it was a lot of brick and mortar retailers that have suffered. Here in North America, 21 major retailers filed for Chapter 11 in 2020. But then there's also some advent of new technologies or new capabilities that retailers had started investing in, which had accelerated through time. So curbside pickup being a very good example of that. And what we're seeing is that these things are being adopted not just by retailers, but they're being adopted because of consumer demand, and consumer demand coming from all different areas. We all have very personal stories about these, I'm sure, as we all changed our buying habits over the last 18 months or so. I know personally from my perspective, I have parents who are in their mid-70s, and I never thought the day that I would ever see them order groceries online, but they had to out of necessity because where they lived, the grocery stores weren't able to service them in the way that they needed to due to legislation. And they switched to a full online model where they ordered their groceries online. And here we are just over a year later, where they're telling me on FaceTime and on the phone that there's no way that they'll ever go back to in-person visiting the store for their groceries, because it's so convenient that somebody brings it to their front door and they can pick everything they like, and they don't have to spend hours wandering the aisles of the store. So there are trends that have happened and people that are changing their buying habits that maybe never would have ever considered changing their way of shopping. But what does this mean from a retailing perspective? Well, we hear the words omnichannel retailing thrown around a lot. Retailers that have both a brick and mortar presence and an online or a digital commerce channel as well. And typically we see those retailers that have grown up in the brick and mortar world originally and then have expanded into an online business over the last 20 years or so. That internally, those companies have seen themselves as two businesses. They've seen themselves as their old world traditional brick and mortar business. And then e-commerce is sometimes, or the digital commerce has been sort of a young upstart on the side of the business. And really internally, they're sometimes viewed as two independent businesses. And the consumer doesn't look at you like that. The consumer doesn't look at you as two different businesses. They just look at two different channels for being able to procure products and goods and services from you. So retailers really need to accelerate how to best use those multiple channels. What's best for online? What's best for in-store? If it's something I absolutely know what it is, clearly online's a much better option for me because I know what I'm receiving. If it's something I have to try on, or if I have to look at a color or a size, maybe the in-store experience is much better for me to be able to touch, feel, and experience the product before I make that purchase. Consumers are looking for ease and convenience. They're looking at ways of moving between these channels almost fluidly, because they don't mind. They don't mind shopping those two channels, and they'll pick the one that's most appropriate for them. This is why we think curbside has accelerated so much over the last few years with the last couple of years of the pandemic, is that it really does offer that convenience of online, but the immediacy of in-store. Clearly, retailers such as Amazon have tried to get to that immediacy of delivery of 2-hour windows or 4-hour windows to try and get delivered for certain products. But for the majority of digitally ordered products, you're looking at either next day or a couple of days delivery. Whereas the immediacy of in-store is, if I need it and I need it right now, most people go and shop in a store for that product or for that at that point in time. We're also seeing a change in returns. It's no surprise out there. There's been reports on this for years and years and years. The return rate of an e-commerce order is usually or nearly double that of a brick and mortar purchase. But what we have with this omnichannel world is that where I return isn't necessarily where I buy. I may buy online, but actually it may be too laborious for me to send back through mail. And it's easier for me to go and drop that product off in my local store rather than me package it up and ship it back. In fact, we see roughly 50% of e-commerce returns are being made in store. And as the restrictions of pandemic are now easing off, we're still seeing that trend, stay firm, that e-commerce transactions are increasing, but the return rates that are going back to store are still in that high level. So people still do want to visit stores and still feel comfortable going with stores. It's just they see other easier purchasing options, but they see the store as an easier return options. We also see people with retailers looking at very flexible return policies. And this isn't something due to the pandemic. This is something that's been going on for ages, where people have been trying to make returns as easy as possible, especially in the e-commerce space. But what this is really doing is it's pushing consumers into a situation where they may overbuy goods. And we're seeing this very much where people are buying multiple of a product because they don't know which color they want or which size they want. We can talk about that a little bit later on. But the retailer wants to make it very easy for consumers to overbuy in that scenario. And what we see that doing is, because of these accelerated e-commerce purchasing proportions, we're now seeing that as being a potential impact to margin, where margin's being impacted because the cost of servicing that online sale, again, with those increased returns, means that it's more expensive to service a customer through that channel than it is through the traditional brick and mortar channel. But there are opportunities, and what we're going to spend quite a bit of time talking about today is that there are different opportunities to interact and engage with customers. If you think about how a consumer shops in this omnichannel world, then you need to think about how do consumers interact in this omnichannel world as well, and how can you curate their experience as they seamlessly move between the multiple channels that you service them in. Omnichannel does come with its own challenges, though, and these things aren't new because of the pandemic, but they have been highlighted for those retailers in this omnichannel space because of the increase in e-commerce traffic over the last couple of years. I said earlier that retailers sometimes operate as two businesses, in-store and online, and that raises a whole host of questions that have been there since the dawn of e-commerce. Where do I service my orders from? How do I handle these increased returns? What do I do in my reverse logistics scenario? Do I want to get my products back to my warehouse if they're being shipped back, or do I want to get them into store? What are the cost differences of doing those things? What if if somebody takes something back to a store and it's not stocked in that store? What do I do with that product? Do I have to discount it or liquidate it out of my stock? There's a lot of complex questions here, and there's a lot of lost margin here in where the consumer acts as if you are one retailer and you act as a retailer as two independent streams of traffic. And there's a lot that can be done here to help curate not only the consumer experience to help them decide which is the best way to go, but also from the retailer's experience to be able to direct a consumer in a particular direction when it's more advantageous for the retailer or the consumer, or hopefully both. Yeah. And the ability to be able to make those decisions about how to curate each individual customer journey on the fly during the time of the transaction. Finally, and certainly not least, is sustainability. And we'll talk a little bit about how consumers view sustainability a bit later on. But how do my choices impact the environment? What are the choices that I'm making as a consumer, or how you're servicing me as a retailer? Yes, I want convenience. Yes, I want my product quickly. But are you destroying the planet to service my request? Or are you going to overt lengths which don't make logical sense when looked at in isolation, which makes me feel that, I don't like the way that you're servicing my request from a sustainability perspective. So we're going to explore a few of these in this discussion today. So where are these new opportunities lie? Well, there's opportunities for omnichannel interaction all over the place. The online checkout is the first place to start. And for a number of years, people have been adding in, especially in clothing retailers, adding in boxes for sizes or fitting guides and things of that nature to make sure the product that you're ordering is going to try and fit, with limited or different levels of success depending on which retailers you talk to. But at that point of online checkout, there's very much an interaction point there where you can have a discussion with your consumer to look at their basket, look at their past purchases, look at who they are as an individual, and offer them maybe some different ways of completing that transaction. So if I take this example I have here, you can see from this picture where I've got clearly 3 pairs of shoes, all of different sizes, but all of exactly the same type of shoe. And this is something that we see traditionally in e-commerce retailers where somebody doesn't know which size fits them. So they'll go online and they'll buy 3 pairs of shoes, exactly the same type. The retailer they may be buying from gives them free shipping and free returns. And they'll say, okay, I'll just buy the 3 pairs. I'll get them all at home. I'll try them on, see which size I like or which one works for me, and I'll send the other 2 pairs back. And, this may be a habit. This may be something that this consumer does lots and lots and lots. But if you look at that from a retailer's perspective, how much is that costing you as a transaction? The industry average for shipping of an item is $10. So if you look at that, if I'm shipping 3 pairs of shoes, I'm potentially looking at $30 worth of shipping costs to send them out. And I pretty much know that 2 pairs of those shoes are going to come back to me. So I know, let's say it's $10 to return, ship them back and handle them and put them back through the warehouse and get them restocked again. So effectively, I could be looking at up to $50 worth of shipping costs here that I know I'm going to take as soon as somebody presses that buy button. So wouldn't it be better to interact with that consumer at that point? Wouldn't it be better to harness the power of data and harness the power of artificial intelligence and look at this buying behavior and look at this consumer's history and stop at that point, especially if you're on an omnichannel retailer, so that when somebody's about to click that checkout button, you can say to them, well, it looks like you're trying to buy these 3 pairs because you're not sure which size you are. Actually, there's a store that we know you shop at because we've seen your buying history that's maybe a couple of miles away from where you live. We know all those shoes are in stock. How about we reserve them for you? And we'll hold that stock aside for you so you can go in and you can try them on and you can pick them up and you can have them today rather than waiting for them to be shipped to you. And if you pick them up today, how much would you incentivize somebody to do that as a retailer? If you know that this transaction is already going to put you $50 behind on shipping costs, what if you gave that consumer $10 or $15 or $20 to go and pick up those shoes today? Buy them, pay online and then go and pick up and give them a coupon to maybe buy something else whilst they're in the store now that you've incentivized them. And this is a surprising delight, right? If you look at this from a consumer perspective, I was expecting to buy these shoes online. I was expecting them to get sent to me. And then when they arrived, I was expecting to send them back. Yeah. As a consumer, it was going to take me a while to get the product. It was going to be hassle for me to send them back. At this point, you've now told me if I can go to the local store, I can try them on, I can potentially get them today, and you're going to incent me and give me some free coupons or some free store credit value to go buy something else or maybe even discount my shoes. At this point, you've done something that's best for retailer and best for consumer. And it's also a more sustainable option as well when you think about those shipping pieces that we talked about a little bit earlier. So this is a kind of a new way of interacting. It's a new way of saying, let's look at ourselves as a holistic retailer, and then let's optimize for what is best. Let's optimize for what's best for consumer and what might be best for the retailer as well. To give you another example of this, this is a personal story from my perspective here, which is when I ordered during the pandemic, where this particular store was open, but I saw on my Facebook feed there was an advertisement for a discounted item of clothing that I liked the look of, and the retailer was telling me that there was free shipping to purchase this item. So I went online and I said, "Great, I'll buy it." And I wasn't prompted anything saying, they said it's free 2-day shipping. I said, "Great, that's okay. I'll order the goods." And then what happened? Well, what happened is they then sent me an email, said, "Actually, it's going to be 3-day shipping. Sorry, rather than 2-day shipping, but it's still free." I said, "Okay, that's fine, right? I wasn't desperate for this item." But then I got the note from FedEx about, well, where's this shipment coming from? And what I actually found out was that the product that I had purchased had been picked at a store rather than from a distribution center. And the store that it was picked from was actually walking distance from my own home. It was about 10 minutes walk from my own home. But for some reason, the shipping route that took must have gone back to a FedEx centralized hub or something of that nature. But it went from basically Southeast Florida all the way to Orlando through a sorting center and all the way back, which was a near on 400-mile round trip for that product, which was actually a t-shirt, which was then delivered to my home. Now, if you think about that from a retailer perspective, how much profit did they really make on that shipment, right? They had to ship it all the way there, get it to me. It was free shipping. Could they incentivize me to go to store? Yeah, they'd have said to me at that point, "Hey, it's available. It's just down the road. Do you want to go and pick it up? And if you give me another $5 credit, or I don't know, some other incentive to go and to shop in the store," I'd have probably bought more things whilst I was there, or I'd have probably bought a different color, or, an additional color or something of that nature. But it also made me think about my own purchasing behavior. Is this sustainable, right? Is a 400-mile round trip for a t-shirt really sensible when it was on sale and I was being given free shipping? It didn't seem to make a whole lot of sense, and I'm pretty sure it didn't make profitability sense as well. But these situations don't need to happen anymore. We have data, we have artificial intelligence, we have the way of being able to make these decisions about how to curate or communicate with our customers much more effectively and much faster than we have necessarily done in the past. So we talked about returns as being something that has increased through the pandemic and also through this growth of e-commerce. And returns are becoming a significant challenge for retailers. And we did a survey from Appriss Retail recently about 300 of our customers. And what we got back was there was only about 2% of retailers who had somebody inside their organization who was actually dedicated to looking at returns and solving the problem of returns, which was actually quite shocking given that it's probably the biggest growth vector inside retail right now is returns, and then the cost of handling and dealing with those products. There are many challenges here. Where do you want the product to go? One of our customers that we were talking to was saying they had a problem that during the pandemic, lots of people just before, just coming into winter, were buying lots of winter coats and ski wear and things of that nature. And then as soon as states were still closed, California was particularly an area that was cited in this, is that because the ski resorts were closed or because people weren't traveling out of state, all of those products that were bought were then returned. But rather than being returned to a distribution center, they were actually returned to store. And although those products weren't stocked in those stores. So now these Southern California stores had lots and lots of ski wear and lots of outerwear that were now being stuck on the shelves, or the business processes that were implemented were not to send them back to a warehouse, but were to liquidate them in store. If the item wasn't sold in store, mark it down by 50%, try and get rid of it, sell it through. Again, margin depleting, didn't need to be. By looking at those transactions again and looking at artificial intelligence, looking at where the demand is elsewhere in the country for those products. There could be processes that are implemented to redistribute that traffic or redistribute those products in a more effective way. And again, hence save margins. So there's ways of being able to, again, use data to be able to look at this problem about omnichannel commerce and understand how do we optimize going forward. We talked a little bit about this earlier, about how can you encourage a different consumer behavior. There may be incentives that you can give. They may be coupons or cash-based incentives. In some retailers, it may be experiential. Talking to one jeweler relatively recently, one of their ways of encouraging to get people back into store was to offer free jewelry cleaning. And they were offering this through their e-commerce site that said, well, when you were buying, said, hey, well, rather than having this shipped to you, why don't you pick up in store, and whilst you're there, we'll clean your jewelry for you. Because those retailers knew that there was a bigger basket size in store where their associates could talk to customers and help them with the journey and help them pick another item out, rather than just have the item shipped to them. So use omnichannel to your benefit. Use stores when they're important, and use e-commerce where that's the best option as well. And also think about, well, what's the best option for the consumer and for you? Is buy online, return in store good for you? Is curbside pickup good for you, or curbside ship back good for you? Or do you actually want the item to be shipped back to you? And if that's the case, how do you interact with the customer through those various journeys to enable them to do the thing that's best for them and best for you, and the thing that can optimize the transaction over and above just a default choice? But you also need to remember, it always depends on the consumer and the product. Clearly, taking a t-shirt back to a store is easy. Clearly, taking a bed frame back to a store is not easy. So, use data, use artificial intelligence, use machine learning, use these capabilities that are now becoming very pervasive in the technology landscape to be able to make point decisions about consumer and product interactions at various levels within the consumer journey. So we talked a lot about technology can help. There are many interaction points that are not optimized for omnichannel, from that being from logging into your online account, to adding things to your basket, to checking out and shipping options, to return options, through to buying in store and maybe having things shipped to you as well. There are many interaction points that go on where it seemed more as like a process rather than a way to understand about what's going on and how can you change the consumer journey to be more profitable for you and also better for the consumer. The computers are here, the capabilities are here. You have the data. Retailers have lots and lots of data on consumers, lots about things on product. AI is pervasive and should be used to optimize these scenarios as much as possible, because there's lost margin here. There's ways of making more money as a retailer, not by driving more sales necessarily through your front door, but to get those tack-on sales, those add-on sales, and also make the sale that you are making more profitable and more efficient for you in the way that you transact. Curate the customer experience. Try and do the acting local. Act like that old world shop used to be. They knew their customer base. They knew what people liked. Well, artificial intelligence can help with that now. They can look at each consumer, understand what's best for that consumer, what's the best fit. There's a delicate line between being informed and creepy. We all know that there's that line there about how much we know these companies know about us. But there's a fine line about what's helpful versus what's a bit overbearing. So that's a space where everybody needs to get comfortable, and each business will do that independently and understand a different level set that works for their organization, maybe worse than for somebody else. And you can optimize these transactions that are best for consumer and for the retailer. And that's really the best of both worlds. We're not talking here about strong arming a consumer to do something they don't want to do, just purely for the profits of the retailer. We're looking at areas here, as some of the examples I talked about earlier, where it really can benefit both the retailer and the consumer. And the thing I'll encourage you to think about here is always think about how your consumer views you as an omnichannel retailer. They don't see you as two businesses, online and in store. They just see you as one company. But frequently when you interact with a retailer through those two channels, you're exposed to the internal corporate structure of the retailer as a consumer, which should never be the way. You're told, oh, you can only get that through this channel, or oh, you can only get that in store, or oh, we don't do that this way, or oh, that's an online sale, you have to deal with that differently. Really, the consumer doesn't think about you that way, and retailers need to become more integrated across those channels, as consumers will continue to express their choice of how they want to interact with you and how they want to make their purchases. We talked a little bit earlier about sustainability, and we talked about how consumers view sustainability. And I just put up this image here from Amazon, and this was from a purchase that was something I did relatively recently as an Amazon Prime member. I know I get my free shipping, but I thought this was interesting, where there was clearly a sustainability angle here that was being given to me, which was saying I could either get my goods tomorrow as I'm promised in Prime, or I could wait and have my orders consolidated into fewer boxes, and hence a more sustainable solution. And I would get $2 of rewards put into my account because I wasn't getting my Prime delivery, which was clearly something I chose because I thought, well, this is great. I wasn't desperate for those items. If they took another couple of days to get here, that was great. And $2 back was an absolute bonus for me. So this really gave me a view, though, that this was a good sustainability story. This made me feel better about choosing this option, because I'm sure we're all aware we've all got a stack of Amazon boxes in our house where things just come and, you get one box with one item, and then 10 minutes later, something else comes in, and then a day later, something else comes in. I thought this was a very good option. And this really isn't just for Amazon, right? It's just showing you that somebody that is perceived as one of the market leaders in this space is also looking at these areas and saying, well, how do we consolidate, and how do we make this better for consumer and better for them as a retailer? So, we need to look at, we've talked about shipping. How far does a product go? Is there another sustainable option? Returns, how do we stop the overbuying potentially? We talked about that with the footwear example. And then what are the return options? Is it better for me to take it back to a store or to ship it back? Multiple packages, we talked Amazon. Broken items, if I trust the customer, and I could probably understand whether I trust the customer based on AI and analytics about how you've behaved as a consumer in the past. If somebody says their item's broken, do I really need them to ship it back in order for me to see that it's broken? Or is it actually better to trust that customer and say, hey, just throw it away or recycle it in some way and don't bother sending me back, and I'll send you a replacement item right now? Again, we can look at that trust matrix of a consumer to say, what's the best way here of dealing with this situation? And the key here is consumers care about these issues, and more. Nearly 50% of consumers won't shop with a brand that they don't deem to be environmentally friendly. So, as you're thinking about these interaction points, don't just think about optimize about convenience and profitability. Sustainability is a real thing that we need to think about these days. So retail has changed. Well, that's nothing new. Retail changes continuously. It's always changing. I think what we have seen in the last 18 months, though, is an acceleration of change and an acceleration of different buying and purchasing behaviors, different focus points for consumers. But with that comes new opportunities to grow, new opportunities to interact with the consumers at different points in the transaction. It also gives you an opportunity to reset consumer expectations. If we take that Amazon example we just said, Prime, that I buy Amazon Prime, it means my product comes with 1 or 2 day free shipping. But they can reset my expectations, say, well, maybe there's a different option, even though that's what you've signed up for, which is better and may suit you more. Also, an ability to reset how you service your consumers' needs. It doesn't always have to be online. It doesn't always have to be in store. There may be a better way of being able to use those hybrid environments to be able to service the need of the consumer in a better way. But really, the underlying point of all of these is that technology can help drive all of these by being able to instantaneously crunch vast quantities of data that wasn't possible even 5 or 10 years ago, to be able to really curate that experience. Look at what that consumer is doing right now as you're in the point of interaction within the transaction. Look at who they are as a consumer, how you react, how they interact with you as a retailer, and then make or offer them choices which they aren't expecting that can surprise and delight, but also can increase your profitability as a business as well. There's great opportunity here for omnichannel retailers to really shine, to make the most of their store assets, to make the most of their e-commerce assets, and to really, really show consumers that there's a new way of retailing, there's a new wave of retailing coming. So thank you very much for your time today. I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. And if there's anything you'd like to learn more from this presentation, please feel free to reach out to me. Thank you very much.